Hi, this is Royce Hall. I'm the Director of Business Development at Level 12.
And I'm Matt Llewellyn. I'm one of the team leads at Level 12.
Today I'm going to talk to Matt about a project that we recently kicked off. We are in the design phase of that right now, so we are trying to figure out how we want this project to look, and that's going to inform our actual development process in weeks to come. So Matt, why don't you give us an overview of the project and then tell us a little bit about how that's going to create value for our client.
Okay, so we've got a customer who has on-site operations working on pipes in the streets. And one of the things that they have to do is they have to keep track of all of the personnel and equipment that are on site. They have to keep track of all the activities that happen during their daily operations and workflow. And what they need is a central place, a website, to put all of that information in, upload pictures, and keep notes on project progress. Where they're at now is they are putting all that in manually, basically keeping text chains with their phones and tablets, and they are creating reports manually from all that information when they need it. And what we're giving them is a central place to put all that information and a way to automate those reports, which will greatly reduce the amount of time that their admin personnel are spending on that project.
So the ultimate savings for them is just saving the manpower of the admin people pulling all that information together. I think as well, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I know part of this project is they're doing everything by text right now. It's also very noisy. There's a lot of text that maybe are not relevant to the job, just kind of cluttering up the system. So this should make a more streamlined workflow for everybody as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of churn. So the primary goals are to free up the management personnel's time from what they're doing, and that will allow them to do other things that are more pertinent to their positions, like analytics and management.
So then we're in the design phase right now. We just kicked this off, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that?
Yeah, design phase is complete, and we're a couple of weeks into development.
Okay, so why don't you walk me through what the design phase looks like? Is there a standard way that we do this for our clients? What's involved and what's kind of the output of that?
So the first thing that really kicks off the process is the technical discovery. And from that process, we get an idea of what are the basic bullet point items that the customer needs to get their workflow done. We're going to design software that's custom built to enhance their workflow, to get data from one point to another, or to provide the reporting they need or any calculations that they need. And that workflow needs to be defined beforehand. Once we have that, we take that into the mock-up process, where we're putting wireframe mock-ups together to show in general what's the layout of the page going to look like, where are the particular buttons they're going to look for to do whatever actions they need to do to get through their workflow. And the idea is to give them a way of stepping through that process that will help them to not think as much as possible. Just guide them through it. And then we take those mock-ups. We'll have a meeting with the customer at that point. We'll show them the mock-ups. We'll walk them through what their daily work is going to look like with this software. Then we'll take whatever concerns, comments, questions they have. We'll take that back to the drawing board. Sometimes we do this a couple of times. And at the end of the day, usually we have a set of mock-ups that the customer says, yeah, I can really see myself working with that software and getting my job done. And at that point, that's when we take that to code stage and we start writing code and making the software work.
So we're delivering them kind of a non-functional website at that point, just visually laid out, this is what it's going to look like. And that helps us stay in alignment with the client so that we don't start developing code and spend a lot of time and money for something that they didn't want. We stay aligned with what they actually need, right?
That's right. A picture is worth 1,000 words. It's always easier to change something at mock-up stage than after you've started writing the code for things. And the other upshot of the mock-ups is that it makes the customer think through what it's going to be like to do their job with that software. And that brings up a lot of questions, and it brings up a lot of details that they hadn't really thought of before in the technical discovery. And there'd be a lot of the wouldn't it be nice to sort of conversations, and then that turns into a conversation of, well, here are the things that we could give you within the budget that you're setting aside for this software. And then you can decide what the priorities are for the must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, and won't-haves.
So let me ask you a little more tech-focused question. Part of this application is involving JavaScript and React in particular. Can you dive into a little bit, what we're doing with that technology, and like why React? Why JavaScript instead of anything else that's out there?
So anytime you start developing with JavaScript with another application on the back end, you're essentially developing two applications. One's going to run on the server. That's the one we generally write in Python. And then one's going to run in the client's browser, and that's the JavaScript application. So what that gives you is it gives you a lot more dynamic elements on the page. You're not just looking at a static page with static form fields and filling out the forms and submitting those. When you change things on the page, it's actually going to do things. And when you click buttons, it's actually going to do some of things on the page and interact with that Python application on the back end. So there's a lot of stuff going back and forth across the network, and there's a lot of things that are just happening within the browser, and that's all that JavaScript does. React is a framework that we use to develop with JavaScript. There are lots of different frameworks. React is the one that Facebook created, and that's the one that we are most commonly using at this point to develop our JavaScript applications.
So let me ask you a question that we didn't discuss earlier. You're not a Facebook guy. Developers, a lot of the developers in our shop, they don't get on Facebook. Why are we developing with the Facebook language?
Well, that's a good question. React is the framework that's out there that has a lot of usage at this point, that also has a fairly low learning curve. There are other frameworks out there that may be technically better or better polished at any rate. But a lot of those have a very high learning curve, and it takes a long time for developers to get acclimated to what they need to do in them. So what we want to do is we want to use a framework that, number one, we can hire developers for. And it's a lot easier to find developers with React experience than a lot of these other frameworks at this point. The other thing we're looking for is efficiency. So when we run into problems and unknown complexity within a React application using JavaScript, we want to know that it's going to be pretty easy to go out on the internet and find the solution to the problem. We don't want to be spending the customer's dollars reinventing the wheel. We want to do as much as we can using solved problems so that we can efficiently give them the solution that they need.
And then in addition to that, I know that a lot of our applications have to be usable across platforms. So you have to be able to use it on your laptop, your desktop, maybe an iPad and your phone. Does that inform why we are choosing React for these people? Because it seems like with this particular instance, the cell phone is already part of these people's workflow, and it's probably going to continue being that way since they're not desk people, right? They're working out in the field.
Right, they're working in the field, and they're interacting with this website from a mobile device. So yeah, I mean, React doesn't really specifically have a advantage there, in that we're simply developing a web application so that a mobile browser running that JavaScript is going to essentially be the same as a desktop browser running that JavaScript at this point.
All right, well, Matt, thank you for your time. I appreciate you talking about this project that we're kicking off and the technology behind it.
Thanks, Royce.